Hello and welcome to another episode of the Truth About Real Estate Investing Show. My name is Erwin Cito, the four-time winning real estate agent to investors, host of the podcast, which is this one, the number 81 podcast per iTunes in all of business, where we focus on bringing you true experts, masters of their craft, and we have a great guest for you today in real estate coach and educator Elizabeth Kelly. The term coach has been used very lightly these days. I see folks with 1-2 properties, maybe 12 months experience. Some even with like longer experience, but they have like one property as a side hustle, and they call themselves coaches. Elizabeth Kelly has a bit more to her resume than that. Her own property management company, managed hundreds of doors. Her own portfolio is very significant. She was a full-time real estate investing educator at Rich Dad Canada, having personally taught a couple thousand investors, including many of the influencers and coaches you see today on social media. Many of them offer products that they learn. For example, rent to own. Rent to own is a hot topic at Rich Dad. You see today several wholesalers and rent to own experts that Elizabeth personally taught. Today we touch on a couple subjects such as investment in real estate education and some of the different options that are out there. And there's more than ever. Some do offer better value than others. So we talked about that. Elizabeth shares about her career as an investor journey to arrive at where she is today. Her strategies when she started out back in 2008. It's very different than how she invests today. Her goals are different. The market's different. I think it's something that's really important to investors today. As always, my intention for you, my 17 listeners, is for you to see how a professional investor invests at different stages of their life, lessons that you may learn so you may avoid mistakes and hopefully make even more money. Then we will offend many when we discuss what's working and what's not working. This may shock you. Many fad investments getting a lot of hype will not work in 2023. Make sure you have a listen before investing in any coaching or courses or even buying property. 2023 is going to be a fascinating year, and here at iWin Real Estate, we will be arming our community with the best information possible. Sharing the free webinar. We have one coming up soon, how to sell a tenanted property for maximum return on January 8th, 17th, followed by our iWin in-person networking meeting on Saturday morning, January 28th or 9th. It's Saturday morning. I think it's 29th. I have 28th written, whichever it is. The last Saturday of January, when my team and I share our bold predictions for 2023 for our target investment markets. And we have a real estate investment trust in the house. Lawrence Raponi of Equiton will be giving a brand new presentation to explain how professionals buy apartment buildings, how they screen them, how they find them, the numbers they need before even looking further into information. I know there's a lot of courses and coaching that's being offered out there. So here we're giving it away for a very nominal fee from a very serious professional. Again, this is Equiton. They are a real estate investment trust, as in they are also regulated under Ontario Securities Commission. So these guys are legit. So learn how a professional invests, or at least learn how investing in a REIT works, including cash flowing from day one. If you're on my email newsletter, then you already know how to register. If you don't, well, that's just silly. Go join the 10,000 plus hardworking Canadians already on our newsletter. You can go to www.truthaboutrelestateinvesting.ca. Again, that's www.truthaboutrelestateinvesting.ca. Enter your name and email, and you will receive an email when we have events and new episodes of this show available. New to 2023, we will be producing a lot more free educational videos and podcasts. So if you have any suggestions or topics you would like to see covered, please let us know. You'll see, again, on our email newsletter, we'll let you know when we have new pieces of educational content available. We're doing a lot more YouTube. Our YouTube channel is also called Truth About Real Estate Investing. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce you to my friend, Elizabeth Kelly.
I know. 2023.
Okay, ready?
Oh, that was bad. It works, I think. Hi, Elizabeth. What's keeping you busy these days?
Not too much. Had a fantastic holidays. Lots of quality time with the family, enjoying the weather. How about you? What's going on with you?
I need more holiday. We're actually leaving on holiday next week. I think you know that, right?
No, but tell me, where are you going?
Just on a cruise. My daughter was sick before the holidays, so we weren't able to fly.
Oh, gotcha.
So we had to rebook everything for this coming week.
Gotcha.
So I haven't really completely decompressed yet from 2022.
Yeah, you had a crazy busy year, and that Wealth Hacker conference was awesome.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed that.
Appreciate it. Yeah, we'll do something similar. I mean, we'll talk about it at lunch.
Yeah.
Have some brainstorm ideas.
Sounds good.
But yeah, it'd be our vision for 2023 is a bit more balance.
That's a great vision to have, and I think there's a lot of people who are in that same situation. I think, the way we started 2022 in the beginning with, it was so hard to find properties and everybody was kind of buying, and then, the steep decline started a couple of months in, and I think people got to the end of the year. I think people are kind of worn out right now. I think people are, maybe a little uncertain about what's coming and, rethinking things, and it takes a lot, I think, to admit that the strategies or the things that you were doing or the way that you were thinking before, they're not serving you anymore. So what does that new game plan look like? And I love that you're, one of the front runners in terms of, hey, we need to revisit what we're doing because it's not working for us.
Because, for example, we're going to talk about it, is like where your career, like day job career, I don't know what the term is, like your day job career, we'll talk about Emmett's as well, and then just even what we're seeing. I don't think anyone expected the recession to come this quickly. And just like you were saying in how the real estate market behaved, like beginning of the year, like no one could hire anyone.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing, what was it? Salesforce just announced 10% layoffs.
And Amazon, yeah.
Yeah, Amazon's going to 18%, I believe it is. And I was having dinner with someone who works in a mid-level pharma company. They're going to lose 30%.
Oof.
So jobs are we haven't had jobs at this much risk since 2008, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
Here's the interesting thing, though. When I was driving here this morning, I was listening to the radio, which I don't do very often because I'm not a big kind of listener of, that kind of stuff. But what they said was that the number of jobs that were created in the last little while was much higher than they anticipated. So now they're saying that's probably going to lead to a larger interest rate hike because obviously inflation's not as much of a problem because of all these jobs that have been created. So it's almost like this crazy, on one side we're hearing all these companies and, layoffs and everything else. And then they're like, oh, but the actual stats say this. And you kind of go like, where's the balance? How do you know what to believe? And then at the end of the day, what you're left with is, hey, these next interest rate hikes are going to be bigger. Yeah.
And how do you, like, I'm fascinated by this stuff.
Yes.
Then my thought is then, like, how much job losses is enough? Because the U.S. Fed notes were just released yesterday. And so people are pouring through them. I'm not that detail oriented, so I just read the news on them. And that was what was in the meeting notes with Jerome Powell and all the other staff at the U.S. Federal Reserve, was that jobs are still too high. There hasn't been enough losses yet, so they're gonna either have more raises or hold rates longer than they expect.
Yeah.
Right. But I can't believe that's someone's job, well above our pay grades, to decide how many job losses is enough.
Well, and at the end of the day, those are really people. Those are families that we're talking about. And that, to me, really speaks to why I could never be an employee again. Why I could never, it's one of the many reasons why I'd never want to be an employee again, but literally I could be doing an outstanding job. I could be amazing at what I do, and my livelihood is still dependent on somebody else's decision, somebody else's whim, or what the numbers say.
I have this friend who's a C-level executive for a big company, so they have board meetings and stuff, whatnot. So in trying to plan vacation around their schedule, it is really difficult, right? Because, for example, we looked at cruising for a certain date. So, for example, to have a cruise that worked for their schedule costs 50% more than the week after.
Wow.
So as a group, we're like, I don't think any of us are willing to pay an extra $2,000.
We love you and all, but
yeah, we love you and all, but
just to have your company, the rest of us are paying for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so same thing. Why a lot of us investors are investors is to be free of these sorts of whatever on our time, loss of control of our time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now we're seeing, I have a family member who's in federal government in Ottawa, and they were just recently announced they're required to be back in the office 2 to 3 days a week. It was actually a funny conversation because she was like, "Oh, can you believe it?" And like, so my question was, "What was it before the pandemic?" "Oh, we were supposed to be in the office 5 days a week." Like, oh, so you went from 5 days a week to 2-3 days a week? That's pretty good.
Yeah.
So yeah, the world is not lost. It's not the end of the world.
No. But I mean, I suspect, you and I were talking earlier, the idea of going back and working for someone else and having to be sitting, at your desk in the office for 9 a.m. every day, for a lot of us as real estate investors, that's not something that we value or that we want.
Right. So something I want to cover was you and I are real estate investors, but we also both have day jobs. Is that the right term? What would you call it?
See, I don't think, as a coach, I don't do it because it's a job. I do it because I love it.
Okay. You have a love career. I don't know what's the word.
It's my passion.
I'm trying to name it.
It's my passion project. It's something that I never get as much fulfillment from achieving my own goals and doing my own things as I do from helping other people achieve theirs. And to know that ripple effect of, someone doing their first deal or someone, securing a property that's going to provide good cash flow and get them one step closer to leaving their job. That makes me way more excited than anything I could do for myself.
Right. I do want to preface that by saying not everyone can do that.
I don't know.
You're in a special position.
I don't know that I would say not everyone could do it. I think theoretically.
No, sorry. I'm specific to what you do.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Because one thing I don't like, and you and I both agree on this. Apologies, putting words in your mouth. Is like what that's being sold out there. Like as in like all these marketing things like quit your job. Pursue your passion, you never work another day in your life type thing. Yeah. Right? Okay. So then the example I often give is like restaurants and gym owners. Like they may love it, but those are the two businesses that banks don't lend to for a reason. Yeah. Because they're the highest default rate. Yeah. Right? The highest failure rate. So yes, you can work in your passion. You may not ever be able to stop working in your passion. Yeah. Right? You can stop working in your passion because you have your portfolio.
Yeah, but honestly, my portfolio gave me the ability to follow my passion. It's not like I follow my passion because of, like, do you know what I mean? Like, my passion is what makes me really happy. My portfolio is like my fallback. And no matter what I was doing, real estate helped me build my net worth to the point where I did have the freedom to choose what, how and what I wanted to do. And I had some health challenges in 2022. They were unexpected. And my passion gave me the ability to be flexible so that, there were times where I was, spending more time in bed than I had thought, or I was, I had a couple of surgeries that I was recovering from, and none of this was expected or planned. It wasn't like I started the year and said, I'm going to go on a health journey. But it also gave me the money to hire the professionals to help me recover quickly. And it gave me the ability to hire people to support, a positive mindset and all those other pieces that go into it. It's not just your physical recovery, it's your mental recovery, because, you go through life and you just kind of assume that your body's going to be there for you and your mind is going to be there for you. And then you reach this point in kind of middle age where you go, this stuff isn't forever.
Aren't you younger than me?
I don't know how old you are.
We won't get into it.
What is the average age? Like 84 or something like that is the average lifespan.
Wait. Is midlife crisis like nowish for us then?
Well, I wouldn't say I'm in a midlife crisis. I'd say that people.
But you said midlife, but
yeah.
No, but like, so then, like, if we were gonna have a midlife crisis, it'd be nowish.
Yeah, I mean, we're a long way from real estate now, but I think it's very common for people in their 40s to, you wake up in the morning and you don't jump out of bed anymore. Like, your knee hurts or your back hurts or this hurts or, and you don't have the same energy that you did. So I think it's very common for us to start thinking about what does the next half of my life look like, right. Because when I was younger, I didn't know what I didn't know.
Interesting.
But now, and I'm assuming, you have aging parents as well. So, we're sort of confronted with this idea that, this is what my parents are going through. This is what they're dealing with. This is the mortality. Right. How am I going to plan and prepare so that I'm not living that? Right. Because my husband and I, we don't have kids. So we can't say, okay, well, our kids are going to take care of us. because they're not. We don't have any. So we need to make sure we plan and prepare better so that we don't, end up dumped in a home somewhere and with no assets and no one to care for us.
You bring up a good point, because when I speak to an investor for the first time, often they're very novice and they haven't planned, right? So now they're looking for how to get to some sort of form of financial security, financial freedom, financial peace. I like the term financial peace. Versus me, I've been constantly planning.
But you always say that, you're a worrier, right?
Yeah.
And you have anxiety. So that planning piece goes with it. But there's other people who are worriers and have anxiety, and they do what I call the ostrich maneuver, which is where they just stick their head in the sand and hope that everything's going to work out.
Yeah. Government will take care of them. Don't worry.
Yeah, but I think we all pretty much have a good idea at this point that we have to take care of ourselves. And quite honestly, I love that I have the power to do that.
Yeah.
That the locus of control is within me, and I don't need to rely on anyone else.
Okay, so let's get into the journey, how you got there.
Yeah.
What did you do for a living before real estate?
So I had a few different careers. I have a degree I have a science degree in kinesiology, and then I
don't think I knew that.
Well, I do very little with it unless somebody gets sick, and then I pay a lot of attention. And then I have a post-grad certificate in sport administration. So for a long time, I worked for not-for-profits and I did fundraising, ran charity events. I worked for United Way and for the MS Society and that kind of stuff. And then I moved I got my insurance licenses, and I worked for State Farm at the time. And I did home, auto, and life insurance. And then my husband and I built a portfolio, and he was finding it to be too much managing the properties we had and working full time. So we made the decision that I left my job and I started managing the properties full time and grew the business. And then he left his job in, I think it was 2012 or 2014. I can't even remember at this point. But he left his job, and then we were both working full time in our property management company. I also got my mortgage license, and I was working with investors to help them secure funding and private mortgages. And then my husband got sick in 2017, so I had to give up my mortgage license and get right back into full-time property management. And then I was teaching for Rich Dad for 8 years as well.
What year did you start?
For teaching for Rich Dad?
Yeah.
2012. I taught 3 courses for them. And I loved it. I absolutely loved the opportunity to get out and meet with new investors and talk about their journey and help them plan their future. And then I saw how much a year later, 2 years later, the same students would come back and connect with me, or they'd message me on Facebook. And they were struggling, and sometimes they hadn't even done one deal. They didn't know where to begin. There was all this theoretical knowledge out there, and they didn't know how to take the points or the parts that were most relevant to them and work that into a plan that was going to help them achieve their goals.
Always a gap between theory and application.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges for new investors is that there's so much information now.
You could argue too much.
Yeah. Well,
and some of it's really terrible.
and when you're starting out, you don't know what's good advice and what's bad advice, right? Same as you don't know who can you trust or who should you put on your power team, because you learn some of those lessons the hard way.
Right. And also just difference, your portfolio is extremely different than mine. It's everyone's values, goals, resources is totally different.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's one.
So it's very specific and very custom. I think everyone's plan should be very custom to them.
Yes, and that's one of the things I was talking to one of my clients on Wednesday about. It actually was that because there's so many opportunities and there's so much flexibility in real estate, that everybody's journey is going to look different. But it makes it that
no one's
much
journey
harder.
Looks the same.
Exactly, but that makes it that much harder to figure out what should my journey look like.
Right.
And when you don't know what you don't know, it's really hard to sit down and say, okay, I'm not making a decision on this property because I'm missing, these pieces of information. So all I need to do is get these pieces of information, and then I'm going to be confident in making a decision to move forward. So you get some people who make decisions because they just get so frustrated that they're like, I just have to do something. I set these goals, I have these numbers, and I just better do something because otherwise I'm a failure. And then you get these other people who are like, I'm so afraid of making a mistake and being a failure that I just can't make myself do something.
That's me every day.
But I don't think that is you. I think I think that that's maybe the way you see yourself, but I look at you and I don't see that. I see a lot of decisions made to get to where you are.
That's mostly Cherry.
Well, but you have to agree, right? You guys are a team. And this is another challenge that a lot of investors have. A lot of my investors that I coach are couples, because it's very challenging to go from, I have a job and you have a job and we spend 8 to 10 hours a day apart and we need to come to a consensus on like how to manage our household. And then all of a sudden to be like, hey, we're business partners. Now we need to have consensus on how we run our business and how our finances interact. And that's a very different journey than, hey, I'm doing this by myself and I'm the only one who I need to make happy.
Short answer, it's complicated.
It's always complicated. Life is complicated. But it's good. It's beautiful.
Where did you start learning real estate? Like, did you just start investing on your own, or did you, or in combination with taking courses, or?
So I met Emmett in 2005, and he already had a couple of investment properties with his business partner. And the more we kind of talked and the more I saw what they were doing, the more I wanted to be part of it. So I bought a couple of condos as my sort of first investment properties. And we were doing, this was a long time ago, we were doing duplex conversions in Newmarket and, buying single family homes and, doing rent to owns and those kinds of things. So in 2008, we started taking courses with Rich Dad. And
good timing.
Yeah, it was actually, because then we turned around and bought a whole bunch of buildings really quickly. And it was amazing. Like some of the people that, we took our courses with and we connected with, like Denise and Stuart McPherson. We're still friends with them 15 years later, and we met them at Rich Dad. I
did not know that.
Yeah, some of the networks that you build and the people that you meet are tremendously beneficial years in the future. Even Michelle and Mike Gauthier. I had some challenging days building a property management company, and Michelle was my go-to phone call. Like, these people that you place in your network, these people that you continue to build relationships with, they can be absolutely essential to your growth.
That's hilarious. I didn't know that's how you knew Stuart and Denise, because I met them through Rain. I had no idea they were a part of Rich Dad.
Yeah.
Not that it matters.
No. It doesn't matter. And quite frankly, I think that, that's part of one of the challenges for newer investors is like, where do you put your time and your money? How do you choose to educate yourself? How do you learn what you need to learn in order to, be confident to make those decisions moving forward? What kind of strategy do you want? Are you focusing on cash flow? Are you focusing on net worth? All these critical decisions you need to make at the beginning. It's like, I don't know. It's like I would imagine the high school kids feel right now. They're a year younger than we were. They're 17, and they have this tremendous weight on their shoulders, and they feel like they need to, make this decision about what they're going to do for the rest of their life. Like, what did you go to school for?
Business. Okay,
so you're kind of doing what you thought, but clearly I'm not doing anything in terms of my degree. And I was actually talking to my goddaughter on New Year's Eve, and I said to her, don't be so afraid that you're going to do something, that you're going to make a decision and you're going to end up not wanting to do it. Because sometimes doing something and figuring out the answer is no gets you closer to yes.
It's often your best education.
Absolutely.
Elon Musk didn't even finish university.
Yeah.
Right. Michael Dell didn't finish university.
Yeah, unless you're something like an engineer like my husband, or you're an accountant like Cherry. Like, a lot of us who take these more general degrees don't end up doing very much with them, or we end up in a very specialized branch where that's when the experience comes in, and it's way more useful than anything we did in university. I wrote a lot of psychology exams. I can't remember most of what I learned.
There's more options for education than ever, everywhere.
Yeah.
Formal, post-secondary, courses being offered by real estate people. Like, there's never been this many options. No. Like, when I started out, I think there was really only 2. I didn't even know that Rich Dad was available for courses back then. I joined Rain, and they were the only ones, and they weren't even based in Ontario.
I don't see Rain as sort of being in the same category as some of the other ones. Like, you look at Rich Dad and Keyspire and some of the other big ones. They're all different. They're all different, but a lot of the formulas are the same. Like, the process is the same, and the end goal is the same. So really, I think what you need to focus on is what is the quality of the information that's delivered. And
what you need.
Yeah, and you don't, if you're someone who's looking to really gain information, then your focus should be on who's going to provide the greatest quality content, who's going to teach me the most, and less about, is this a place to network? And I think that that's one of the things, is that there's so much competing information coming at people now. It's how do you make a decision about what's the right thing for you?
I was thinking about my own journey, and I'm cheap. So let's start with that.
Frugal. The word's frugal.
Well, you can use both. So I don't poo-poo on any certain organization. I'll use a timeshare sales thing of a dealie as my analogy. I remember Cherry and I signed up for this presentation.
Yeah.
I forget what we got for free. I think we got a free night or two at up in Collingwood or whatever.
Oh, I think I went to the same one.
Yeah. So we saw the dog and pony, the required pitch that you had to go through, and it all sounded wonderful. The salesperson, who wasn't really a salesperson, like she was a timeshare owner. She was really just sharing her experience.
Yeah.
Lovely lady. You never would have thought she was a professional salesperson, but wonderful pitch. It all sounded wonderful. But Cherry and I went in with the plan. We're not buying anything, right? And like, wow, I was so tempted.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to do my due diligence afterwards. So they made their pitch. I said no. They brought in the closer. I still said no. He got mad at me. Whatever. We said we're not buying anything today.
Yeah.
And then my first thing I did when we left the room, got on my phone. I did a Kijiji. I went on Kijiji and checked, can I buy this timeshare from someone else secondhand?
Yeah.
And then I quickly found out I could buy the exact same thing that they're selling me for about 10 to 20 cents on the dollar.
Wow.
Because there were senior people who no longer wanted it.
Yeah.
And so I could buy it for pennies on the dollar privately and get the exact same thing.
Yeah.
But then you think about all the people who signed on the spot without doing the basic due diligence.
Yeah.
And I see the same with these courses and networks and memberships. Right? Like the analogy I give is often, I was talking to someone, like some of these membership groups are like $30,000. And like, okay, do some comparison shopping. What do I get for $30,000 versus I can hire a one-on-one coach for usually a third the cost, somewhere around a third.
Yeah.
Right? 30 to 40%, like 30 to 40 cents on the dollar, I can get a really quality coach one-on-one.
Yeah. I think it's about knowing who else is out there, like fully researching all of your options. And some people, it is. I mean, I think we sat in probably a similar room to you, and we had the same thing. My husband and I said, we're not buying anything. And we had just taken our negotiations course with Rich Dad. So we literally sit and picked apart all the different negotiation tactics in there. And we were keeping notes. And then we went out afterwards for lunch and we compared notes about what strategies did they use.
And were they good?
They were relatively decent. They definitely weren't professional sort of salespeople. But certainly they were probably, in my estimation, they were probably realtors. Something, starting newer realtors, so they would make the commission on that. That was my estimation. But I think it's really hard for people who are starting out to have that critical thinking. It's much more likely that we become emotional. And I think sometimes that's where some of the bad decisions get made. Whether it's looking at a deal, whether it's looking at a partner, whether it's looking at an investment opportunity, is people get emotional. And I don't want to in any way disparage. I mean, if I hadn't spent my time with Rich Dad and I invested double what you had quoted for my education at Rich Dad, but the way my husband and I looked at it was he had an engineering degree, I had a science degree, we both invested money and time in this. If we were going to invest in our real estate education, then we just needed to make sure that we took action and made it happen, which we did. The challenge is when you invest that kind of money and then you still don't have the pieces that you need to move forward. And my husband is the personality type where he is supremely confident that no matter what happens, we'll be able to figure it out. That is not to say that every deal we did made money, that we never made a mistake, that everything was roses and sunshine. It definitely wasn't. We learned some hard lessons and we learned some expensive lessons. So you just need to be prepared for that. And recognize that, sometimes you're going to pay more if you go to a dealership than if you bought a car privately. because there's overhead to pay for and there's advertising to pay for and there's all those other things. So there could be other options out there that are not as expensive or that might be a better fit for you.
Right.
But I believe there's a time and place for, group collaborations, group education, those kinds of things. Just do your research and know what you want and need.
Just exactly to your point, there's so many options and people need to know what's right for them.
Yes.
So a lot of these programs, a lot of the more expensive programs are meant for people who are going to go full time.
Yes.
Right. I think they all know maybe 3% of the people that go through will be truly successful full time. Maybe 3%. So then knowing that, it's like when I went to when we were having our first child, Cherry and I went to these breathing classes at the hospital. For like,
do you mean like Lamaze?
Yeah, I don't know if they called it
classes?
that. But
birthing classes.
The objective was so that you could go through delivering the child without taking pain medication.
Right. Okay.
So my first question was, how many people take the epidural?
Yeah.
The nurse said, the hospital nurse said 80%. Like, okay, we'll just do that.
Well, and then you look at it now, and fully a third of births are C-sections. So, I mean, it's not even as much of a factor at that point. Like, you don't have a choice in the matter.
Right. My point is, if you go in knowing you have a 97% chance of not needing everything that they're going to teach there, maybe it's not for you.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I hadn't thought of it like that.
Because generally my clientele is all side hustlers, right? They're looking to build like a portfolio of like 1 to 10 properties and keep their job. They like their job. And so do they need all of that? I don't think so, personally.
The challenge I have with some of the sort of bigger education programs is it almost feels like you come out with kind of just enough to be dangerous. So you have a lot of theoretical information, but again, it takes us back to where we started today, which is how do you take all that theoretical information and shape it into a plan that makes sense for you, that's going to enable you to achieve your goals in the shortest amount of time possible. And it still doesn't give you all the people that you need to know and all the information that you need to have in order to make decisions and those kinds of things. So I mean, I'm a little biased. I've had coaches most of my life, and I fully believe in the value of coaching. And I think that that's kind of the niche that coaches fulfill, is that it helps people, when they have that knowledge, it helps them figure out their individual journey.
Oh, I've had a coach for almost 10 years. Same coach.
It's Mary Ann Gillespie, right?
Yes.
She's amazing.
Yeah, she's
super inspiring.
She's something special.
Yeah, she is.
She's so humble about it.
Yeah, she's a pretty amazing lady.
Where was I going? Okay, so what I find more recently, the last couple of years, I don't know, within 10. So we haven't had a bear cycle within the last 10 years, which is also the same time some of these groups were created.
Yes. So
then what I find is missing is experience, which is why we have you on the show.
I appreciate that.
Now let's talk to your investor journey, because your investor journey has changed.
Yes.
Like your original goal is very different than what your goal is today.
Yeah.
And that's why I want to discuss it, because people's goals change.
Yes.
People change. People's situations change. And again, just like we talked at the beginning, everyone's investor journey will be different. Everyone's goal is different. And that's why I kind of want you to talk to your journey, so people can see what they like about your journey. Maybe they were like, oh, I want to do that. Oh, I like that. That makes sense to me. That's where I am in my life. I want that.
Yeah.
Right. So you're all the map.
The first thing I think that people have to get comfortable with is the idea that, and this was part of my journey, was I thought, everybody talks about buying real estate and buying real estate and buying real estate. And unless it's a strategy like flipping, very few people talk about selling. So I'm like, if I want to sell my portfolio, I must be a failure. I must be a bad investor. And it took a while for me to come to terms with the idea that I want things in my life that serve me. And around the same time when I started thinking about wanting things to be different, I hired my high performance coach. And what he helped me understand is that high performance is not about never making a bad decision or never changing your mind. It's about your ability to recognize where you are, where you want to be, course correct or pivot as fast as possible, so that you are minimizing the amount of time you are doing stuff that doesn't serve you. So as soon as I learned that piece of information, it was like a light bulb went off, and I was like, I don't want to do this. I have bought myself freedom from my job, but I don't have the time freedom that I wanted. And so I started having conversations with Emmett, and Emmett was struggling with the same thing, where he was like, no, like we worked so hard to, buy these properties and build our portfolio and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, but we've increased our net worth. Now we want to buy our time back. So if we sell our properties, then we have this pool of funds, and we can move into different things. We can move into land development. We can move into new construction. We can, we can sit back and do a bunch of private lending for a while until we find, exactly what we want to do.
Right.
And as we started to make those decisions, all of a sudden it was like the stars kind of aligned for us, and, things kind of became clear. And it was at that time when we started selling the properties that my health started becoming an issue. And it was almost like the universe. And at first I was very upset, and I was struggling and disappointed, and I was like, I'm still young, and why am I struggling with health issues? And I realized it was basically the universe going, this is the time for you. You made the right decision. You've given yourself time freedom. Now you can choose how you want to spend your time. And that made me so excited, because now I get to choose. And this is one of the great things about being an entrepreneur. I get to choose my clients. Just because I do a discovery call with someone doesn't mean that I'm automatically going to take them on as a client. If I don't feel that they're, coachable and open to feedback, or if I don't feel that I have the right skill set or the right experience to serve them fully, then I'm probably going to refer them to somebody else. Somebody like Christian, who is, an amazing coach and super skilled and experienced in his own areas. He might be a better fit for someone. I don't have to take every...
And geography. His specialty is within a certain small radius. But
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So I don't have to take on every client, the same as every client doesn't have to choose, a specific, like each coach. Just because you talk to a coach doesn't mean you have to work with them. Just because you talk to a realtor doesn't mean you have to hire them.
Yeah, just because you like their Instagram doesn't mean you have to work with them.
Exactly. So, the ability, going back to what we were talking about, the ability to recognize that what's going on right now in my life isn't serving me. What does it look like if it does? And asking those kind of bigger questions, because I think a lot of what we spend time doing as real estate investors is doing. We're do. I find a job, find a property, run numbers, look for power team. Like, we spend a lot of time doing. Sometimes we don't spend enough time sitting back and going, what do I want? What is the life that I want to create here? I have a couple of new clients who started with me recently. They don't want to leave their jobs. They just want to make, $20,000 a year because they want to have a really good travel trip plan, whatever it is, whether it's 2 trips a year, whatever it is. They just want to travel, and they want something that's going to fund their travel. They work for the government, or they work in Department of Defense or whatever, and so they're going to have a good pension. They're going to have a relatively easy job. They just want to improve the quality of their life, and that's okay too.
But they're being required to go back to the office. I tease.
I wouldn't want to go back to the office myself, so I can't really judge on that. But I think
it's tough to give up that kind of income, though.
It is. And for me to pretend that when Emmett left his job that everything was roses and sunshine would absolutely be disingenuous, because it was tough. We didn't do a great job at the time of saying, okay, how much is the income that needs to be replaced, and what does this look like? So he went from 6 figures as an engineer with full benefits and everything else. We went down to literally 0 income. So then all of a sudden, the money that we were churning and continuing to put into our portfolio, into renovations, repairs, upgrades, and growing, all of a sudden we couldn't put that same money in. We had to take the money out to support the household. And neither one of us had business degrees. But a lot of people, when they become real estate investors, you don't realize now you're a business owner. So you need to know about IT, and you need to know about marketing and social media, and you need to know about budgeting and financial planning and cash flow analysis and
some legal stuff too.
Legal stuff. Like, you need to know all of that all of a sudden. And there's not very many people you can call for help with that. So
Which is why you need a coach if you're going to be really serious.
Yeah, and there's, again, you need to know what you need. So if you are
But most
someone,
don't.
no, but then you have to do your research.
Yeah.
But so for a lot of people, they choose a coach who just helps them in one strategy, which is fantastic. But then it takes them back to they don't have the business foundation they need. They don't have, the corporate structure set up, or they don't, have their financing piece in place, or, they're missing pieces on how to like analyze markets and run numbers. So they know a strategy, which is great, but there's other pieces that are missing.
And then I'll add to that the piece that I think that's missing often is the experience to know what a deal looks like.
Yes, and you know what? Honestly, people's ideas of what deals have looked like in the last 2 years, there has not been the number of deals that there used to be. I mean, with the amount that people are paying for properties and the bidding wars and the inability to put in, conditions, a lot of what people were buying as deals were not deals. So we need to get reacquainted with what does a deal look like? And the fundamental is we need to be buying under market value. That is a fundamental that has always been true in real estate. And it is more so true now as the market is continuing to decline. Because I don't for a second think that, as of next week, the market will start to recover. I think we're probably looking at 2 years before we really truly hit the bottom. Because now we're about to go through a phase where all those people who were qualifying for mortgages at the stress test, we're above the stress test. All those mortgages are coming up for renewal, and there's people who are not going to be able to afford to be able to pay 7% interest.
Yeah, there's probably going to be some inventory, some distressed sellers coming on the market.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So that presents opportunities for people who have done their homework and who have educated themselves, and they're working with a good mortgage broker, and they have access to capital. They will have the opportunity to buy under market value.
Here's the other challenge, though, is that I find some novices are depending on inexperienced coaches to help them to qualify what a deal is. I spoke to an investor just 2 weeks ago. Horrific deal that her coach checked off on. Both her realtor and her coach passed it. I said, if you were my client, I wouldn't even have shown you this property, let alone let you write an offer on it.
Yeah.
Right. I knew right away this was the no-go. And it's plausible that the coach was just simply inexperienced. If they just believed what they saw on their spreadsheet, it looks like a good deal, right? The realtor, they were out of market. They were an out-of-market realtor. They could have had their best intentions. They just didn't know any better. And then the investor definitely did not know any better.
Yeah.
Right. So again, we say do your homework. It means a lot of things to different people.
It does, and so many of the fundamentals that have been taught since 2008 have been very much applicable to a growing market. And there's not a lot of people around who have seen how to function in a market like this. And I'll be honest, I'm not buying right now. I am not buying right now because next week, next month, next year, it's going to be worth less than what I buy for. So I would prefer to buy when prices are lower because it's going to make my cash flow more appealing. Even if the interest rate is 1% more, I'm okay with that.
Oh, damn, we don't have that much time. Because you've done like everything. I'm sure there's lessons from almost everything.
You thinking where you want to go now?
I don't have the time for it. Here's one question I do want to ask, because I if I recall correctly, you used to do a lot of small town investing.
Yes. Yeah.
Would you do that today?
Not right now. So again, this is part of knowing and understanding the fundamentals of different strategies, how to match them to your market, and how to then coincide with your goals.
Sorry, let me pause you there.
Yeah.
I think the better way to frame this question is, and I think a lot of listeners can appreciate this, is if they're on someone's list, for example, someone who puts together rent-to-owns. My experience has been 9 out of 10 times when I get the email, I've never heard of the city before, the town or city where it's located before.
Yeah.
And it's in Ontario even.
Yeah.
Right? I grew up here, so if I don't know the name of the city, to me that's a red flag.
Okay.
What do you think about that?
Well, I don't think that's necessarily a red flag. So I bought in smaller towns because I bought for cash flow. So typically you're going to be paying less money and you should be generating a decent cash flow. If you're buying in a small town and there's no cash flow, you're not going to see appreciation either. because appreciation comes from the larger markets. So, I mean, you might see a couple of % a year, but you're certainly not seeing what you would see in Toronto or Vancouver.
But there's in between though.
Yeah. So, but then there's in between. There should be a bit of a balance between cash flow and appreciation. You should see a little bit of cash flow, and you should see slightly more appreciation than in what I call tertiary or smaller markets. Whereas when you buy in tertiary or smaller markets, you're primarily buying for cash flow and appreciation. I mean, we should always consider appreciation as gravy. Obviously, in a market like this, there's not a lot of appreciation, but the cash flow is my primary concern. So if you are looking for cash flow and you have done your analysis and you know the economic fundamentals of a smaller market are good, I don't have an issue with that. What I do have an issue with is when people are trying to have everything in one deal. The likelihood that you're going to get cash flow and appreciation to build your wealth in one deal is highly unlikely, especially with the prices in Canada. You can get that more in the US, to be honest. I've been looking at deals in the US lately. And it's definitely because your prices are just lower there. So would I go back on buying in smaller towns? No, because it gave me the cash flow and the ability to be able to create the wealth that I needed to then sell, reposition myself, and go with strategies that give me time freedom.
Just to try to quantify for the listener's benefit, Calvert, for example, I think their threshold is they don't invest anything on any, they won't lend on any property in a town less than 50,000. Sound about right? 50,000 for you?
Yep.
So.
Well, no, my town, I mean, Kirkland Lake is 10,000.
Right. But you're an area expert. It's a little bit different.
Yeah,
and
but
you live there.
I wasn't always. I didn't start out an area expert. I kind of became one because of spending so much time there and being so active in the market. I think that's another challenge that new investors do is they try to become an expert on everything at once. It's important.
Recipe for disaster.
Yeah, it's important to pick your niche. You know, choose your market, choose a strategy, become an expert, and then grow from there.
Yeah.
Don't try and know everything about everything all at once.
Because no one will ever pull the wool over your eyes if you are an expert in that subject area, in that neighborhood.
100%.
In that property strategy.
Yep.
Right.
And I love it. You know, I get people calling me for property management, and they're going, oh, my realtor told me I could rent the unit for this. And I'm like, no. No, you can't. You can't rent it for that. That number doesn't even make sense. Yeah. So it's
lack
important.
Of homework. Well, did you at least go on Kijiji, Facebook Marketplace, to check what rents were before trusting what your realtor is telling you?
Yep. Right. And putting the right people on your team. You know, do you know the right questions to ask to make sure that, you know, your accountant and your lawyer and your mortgage broker and your realtor, that they're the right people for you? Because let's face it, how many realtors are there in Canada?
A bajillion.
A bajillion, right. Yeah. And there's a very, very small percentage of them that I'd actually want to work with.
Yeah. Even just be in the same room with.
Yeah. Well.
Let alone work with.
I like most people, so I'd probably be in the room with them. But, you know, as investors, we're looking for a very specific skill set, especially when we're starting out and we don't know what we don't know yet. So until we are the experts, we need to have high integrity, high quality people around us who are the experts and can share that knowledge and information to make sure we're making good decisions and not just making a decision because they need to pay for their BMW next month.
It's funny because I find generally people have a healthy distrust of large corporations. I'm surprised they don't have the healthy mistrust of people selling them stuff.
That's a good point.
Here's an example I often give people. Like one of our big banks was investigated and they were found guilty of pushing products on their customers that they did not need,
yes.
particularly targeting seniors.
Right.
And I remember them interviewing people at the branch level and saying, like, why did you do this? Because my job counted on it.
Yeah, I had a quota I had to meet. I remember that.
Right?
Yeah.
So not two things. The institution was doing things they shouldn't be doing.
Yep.
And human beings at the front line were doing it because it meant that they could make a living.
Yep. And that was probably one of the primary reasons why I left my job, was because I didn't want anybody else's ethics and integrity to dictate how I conducted my business.
So where's the same mistrust for all these other influencers out there? And I say that because one of my predictions for this year is we'll see a couple of them go bankrupt.
Yeah, I could see that. I think I think we still have the idea that what we see on social media, and we go, oh, it's on the internet or it's on social media, and we know, we tell ourselves that's not reality, but we see these people living these lives and we're like, I want that life. And that emotional tie to wanting that life overrides any sort of intellectual thought about, is this really the life that they're living?
Right. Because that's how marketing is designed to work, to influence people.
Yeah, marketing is designed to make everything look like roses and sunshine.
Which is funny because the way I design my marketing is, well, I do a lot of the same stuff, but I invite people to come meet my clients as well. So you can ask them yourself what their life is like.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, I'm not a big one for posting, deals that I'm doing and stuff that I'm not a big one for posting that all over social media. And I actually...
to stay on the right side of the Ontario Securities Commission. Wise.
Also that. But I was talking to a marketing consultant yesterday, and she's like, you need to do more videos. She's like, you need to share more about your life. And I'm like, do people really want to know about my life? I don't know. I guess. But to me, it's not second nature to be like, hey, like, here's what my house looks like, and here's, what's going on with my dogs. And like that's just...
Like Grant Cardone does, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe I'm old and I was just raised differently, but it doesn't, I don't know. It doesn't
Depends on your goals. Depends on your goals. If you want to influence and gain and grow whatever you're growing. Because just like at Jesse Itzler's, how he promotes himself versus Grant.
Yeah.
Very different.
Yeah.
Net worth is very different too.
Yes.
Right? Like Grant literally did fly in on his private jet to come to speak at our conference, right?
Yeah.
Literally. Right? He brought the whole family. Versus Jesse, who flew American Airlines.
Did he even fly business class?
Probably.
Yeah.
But he's so rich.
Yeah.
Right? But he doesn't have a private jet.
No. But he just showed up.
And he's richer than Grant.
Yeah.
Right?
He just showed up and he's wearing like his like casual clothes, and he looked like a surf bum.
Yeah, you have no idea how successful he was just looking at him.
No.
Right? Very different. Very different how they present themselves in the media, in their social media, right? But it depends on what your goals are, though. Like Grant's trying to raise funds for his fund, totally cool,
yeah,
right? And for selling his courses, whatnot. Jesse's just like doesn't really care.
Yeah. I think that's important too. Going back to what you said in terms of doing your due diligence, I think it's important to look at people's motivation for doing things.
Yeah. If they're trying to sell you something, you should raise your level of due diligence.
Yeah, and I think, like for someone like you, your goal is literally to educate people, to share knowledge and information.
No, my goal is to make my clients rich.
Well, that's one of your goals. But the reason why you do, so for example, the podcast, I mean, you don't do the podcast in order to make your clients rich. You do the podcast because it gives you a platform and an ability to be able to pull these high quality individuals in and be able to pick their brains and ask them all kinds of questions and then share that information and give back to the community.
Right. Oh, and our 17 listeners will likely get richer for this.
I think you're at 18 now.
18?
Yeah.
You told your mother about the show?
I told one of my clients.
Oh, thank you.
Barb.
Appreciate it.
Barb is now your 18th listener. She's thrilled about it.
Appreciate it. But that is the desired outcome for the show. Because even if you don't want to work with me, totally cool. Even though I don't want to work with you.
Yep.
I will bet you any money that our 17 listeners, their net worth is higher than the average Canadian. Like, I'll gladly bet money on it.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think it takes a certain type of person who listens to podcasts too. I think in general, those people are people who are thirsty for knowledge and information and who are coachable and open to new ideas and feedback. Yeah. I think if you believe that you're right, I mean, I've seen people hire coaches because they just want affirmation that the decisions they're making are right. And when you tell them that they're wrong, they don't like that.
Really?
They suddenly get mad at you and they tell you don't know what you're talking about or that you're disrespectful or you're not listening.
Disrespectful, okay. Trying to save you money. You're being disrespectful. I don't appreciate.
This doesn't look like a real deal to me. There's too many risks associated. You don't know what you're talking about. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it happens, right? Not everything is a fit for everyone. Right.
That's why sometimes I'll send them to my mortgage person or my lawyer, and they'll kill the deal for me.
You're so funny.
Well, it's part of business. Let someone else be the bearer of bad news. Why should it be my job? Yeah. It's their job to be the bearer of bad news. Yeah. You're not getting financing on this. This deal sucks. I mean, I'm speaking as if I'm the mortgage person.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. So then they're not mad at me. So one of my questions I had prepared for you, I thought about a lot well in advance.
At least 5 minutes before we started.
What's not going to work in 2023 in terms of real estate strategy, and what will work? So let's start with what's not going to work.
What is not going to work, I believe, unless you're buying at a really steep discount, is short-term stuff. Things like flips, where your return is dependent on being able to sell for a certain price. We're always one interest rate hike away from another big significant drop in pricing. Mm-hmm. I don't believe buying at fair market value is something that's going to work. So I always believe things that will work will be things that add value. Adding units to existing properties is one of my favorite go-tos. I do it a lot with my clients. Wait,
you're getting into working. Let's just continue with what's not working first.
I like to be positive more than more than negative. What else won't work? It's going to get harder and harder to use private money for stuff, because the interest rate is the interest
as
rates
a borrower.
Okay. Are the interest rates are just continuing to rise as it costs more for people to borrow against their HELOC or whatever the source of their money is, unless it's cash. Another thing that's not going to work.
Anything specific to a strategy? Like what about like short-term rentals, mid-term rentals?
What I'm seeing with my clients is that, in general, short and mid-term rentals are really struggling because there's just less disposable income out there, and people are less willing to take vacations. It's costing them more. I mean, you think about all the people in the pandemic with money at 1.5%. People were doing renovations. People were, they couldn't travel outside of the country, but they were, renting cottages and doing all kinds of stuff, and that was working really well. But now people are like, okay, it's costing me 8, 9, 10% to borrow my money. I'm not going to take a vacation and then put it on a line of credit at that rate. People are quite honestly worried about their jobs. There's less hours available, there's less money available. So those kind of strategies are struggling a bit right now. Mm-hmm. And especially, like, even think about it, the ski hills. How many people have, bought vacation rental properties in markets that have ski hills? And I don't know about you, but I don't see a lot of skiing.
There's no snow.
No, exactly. And
I heard Blue Mountain only had one chairlift working last week. And we're early January right now.
Yeah.
That's insane.
It is. It's a crazy year, and years like this happen. But it's challenging for people who are counting on people coming to go skiing. That just isn't happening right now. So the ski hills, unfortunately, are a couple of years of COVID restrictions, and then no snow. So definitely some of those strategies are not as popular right now. What's working?
Before we get there.
Oh yeah.
Because I asked you this question before offline. Mm-hmm. Because you've, of my personal people that I know, you have more New Brunswick experience than anyone I know. Mm-hmm. But I asked you, how many people have asked you about New Brunswick? From listening to this show, for example.
I've had one person recently contact.
Or just recently, though. The show was a while ago.
Yeah, no.
And I bring it up because I see all these people running to New Brunswick to invest.
Still?
And it's still, I hear it from mostly multi-apartment building buyers. Mm-hmm. Which totally shocked me why no one asked you.
Yeah.
Because, I don't know, like for example, what I often do is like pause for 30 minutes, brainstorm, who do I know who invests in New Brunswick? Mm-hmm. Eventually, most people should get to you.
Yep.
Right? You're not selling me anything. Elizabeth Kelly, what's your opinion on New Brunswick?
I haven't had a great experience there. I'll be honest. The market was very flat for a long time, so there was no appreciation, so you didn't have the opportunity to refinance and pull out equity. I found the tenant profile quite challenging, so I was constantly putting money into units, which would chew through the cash flow that was generated. So basically, St. John, New Brunswick, in my experience, should have been a secondary market based on the population, but it functioned more like a tertiary market because you were buying for cash flow, but you weren't seeing appreciation. And the whole Maritimes was like that. I mean, I bought in 2010 there, in 2011, 2012. I did rent-to-owns there. I had multi-unit apartment buildings there. Some of my rent-to-owns did okay, but I had one that was a spectacular, went down in flames. and it basically wiped out everything for the other ones.
And you have a pretty substantial portfolio. You're no beginner, novice New Brunswick investor.
No, but these were, some of our initial purchases when we were just coming off the Rich Dad courses and the education. So we had a lot of theory, but we didn't know how to apply all of it.
Because every market's different.
Every market is different, and we chose a realtor who it turned out didn't have the best integrity and ethics. It was long distance management, and our first property manager, our first couple of property managers ended up having some challenges with ethics and theft and some of that stuff. So it just, every time we turned around, our cash flow was getting killed. So yeah, that was probably part of the reason we started our own management company in Kirkland Lake.
Any reason you see the rush for people to go buying in New Brunswick?
They're buying based on price per unit. Again, it's the same thing that we did. We ran the numbers and the numbers looked good. What we didn't understand was the reality behind those numbers.
So vacancy and maintenance and renovations will be higher than expected.
Yes, because you have, not everywhere in New Brunswick. Obviously, there's people with higher incomes and that kind of thing. But when you're buying at, I don't know, $75,000 a unit, you're not attracting the A++ tenants. Mm-hmm. And you need to know, that's one of our biggest challenges was we didn't understand the different neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. So we bought in lower end neighborhoods than we believed we were buying in.
Right. I had a friend do that same thing in Hamilton. He was a Waterloo and Toronto property manager for a large corporation. So when he started investing on his own, he continued to invest in Waterloo, but he also bought some buildings in Hamilton, and he had it handed to him. Yeah. Worst tenants.
Yeah. It's a real challenge. You need to, if you're buying in, one of the worst neighborhoods of the city, you need to make sure you're running your numbers and you understand you're going to have higher vacancy rates, you're going to have higher repairs and maintenance, you're going to have higher garbage, and you're going to have greater damages. Mm-hmm. So the rents that you are able to collect need to be high enough to offset that. And people were buying in New Brunswick, quite honestly, because it was so easy to evict tenants and be able to, do the renos and turn the building over.
I want to ask as well, what about multifamily in general? Because I keep asking people like Corey Sproul, I have friends all over the country who do buy apartment buildings all over the country. Yeah. Right? And they all keep telling me there's too many offers on them. Yet I see all these courses that are like, multifamily. But it doesn't seem like that's where the value play is. What are you seeing?
I'm someone who's owned multifamily buildings for 12 years, 13 years. I don't love them. I never really have.
Uh-oh. We're going to get banned by a lot of people.
I know. But I just don't love them. I never have. My husband has loved them. He's bought so many of them, and I think it's because I prefer to stay in something that I know is easy to sell. I prefer to stay a little more liquid. So I would rather stay with smaller buildings. I would rather stay with, fourplexes, that there's always going to be lots of buyers for it. And, if someone has a multi-unit building, there's not always a guarantee that they're going to be able to sell it at top dollar or within a reasonable amount of time. And I know that that's exit strategy, but the reality, and there are some people who are buying who intend to never sell buildings. But the reality is life changes.
Life changes.
Things happen. You get married, you get divorced, people are born, people die. Like, that is the reality of life.
Yeah. Midlife crisis, you want to start traveling full time, whatever. You're going to need the money for it.
Exactly. Like, I look at, my husband's best friend, he passed away unexpectedly at 36. He left behind a stay-at-home mom with 2 kids who are 1.5 and 3 years old. Like, she never in a million years would have anticipated that. And it took a while. They had a couple of big buildings, and it took a while, and she was stuck trying to figure out her finances and look after the kids and deal with all of the estate and all that kind of stuff as she's still trying to figure out what to do with these buildings, and they sat for a while before they sold.
Versus a fourplex would move pretty quickly.
Whereas a fourplex, she could have even, gone to a JV partner or whatever. And again, this is a relatively new phenomenon, this demand for multi-units. It wasn't like this 5 years ago.
Well, there was demand, but it's gone way up.
Exactly. And that makes me think that it is not sustainable.
Right.
Which was the same feeling that I had for the exponential increase in valuations
Right.
in New Brunswick during
Right.
COVID,
Yeah.
is that it's not sustainable.
Right. Same thing with the job market. Same thing with the stock market. It feels like the lesson from the last year has really been anything that's on fire is going to come down.
Yes.
And could come down flaming.
And I think people think that they're buying apartment buildings for cash flow, and they're not. They're wealth building strategies.
Correct.
Because every time you refinance and pull out capital, you're wiping out your cash flow again.
Yeah. Quentin D'Souza was quite upfront about it when last time he was on the show. Mm-hmm. Like his cap, I think he was saying his cap's like 4.5%.
Yeah.
So there's no cash flow.
No. I mean, he knows his numbers, and he knows what he's doing. Quentin's a very smart man.
Yeah.
But people, I think, again, it's part of setting up the expectations and knowing the reality behind the theory. The reality behind the theory is I bought in a bad area in New Brunswick, and I ended up with a less than ideal tenant profile. Mm-hmm. If I had known then what I know now, I probably wouldn't have bought all of the buildings I bought. I might have bought some of them,
Mm-hmm.
but I probably wouldn't have bought all of them. And it's the same thing, I think, with multifamily, where people are like, oh, I'm going to get, $250 per door, and at 10 units, that's $2,500 a month. I've replaced my income. Now I can leave my job. Mm-hmm. And the reality of it, at least in the first 5 years, is you're not going to see cash flow.
Do you like your tenant profile in Kirkland Lake, for example, or any of your apartment buildings? So I'll just preface that by saying I've never done apartment buildings because that's not my target tenant profile.
Right.
I'm way too soft skin for that market.
I'm a lot tougher than I used to be. You have to be.
You have to be.
Yes.
Right. Versus I knew I wasn't.
Yeah.
So that wasn't going to be part of my strategy.
Right.
Like I believe life's too short. Mm-hmm. As much as I love money, that wasn't going to be for me.
Right.
Right. So that's why I stay small. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to guess that my tenant profile makes a lot more money than, well, it just makes sense.
Yes.
They live in a house, duplex, whatever. Mm-hmm. My rent is higher than any apartment building.
Not only that, but you typically have people who are employed and who actively take steps to protect their credit.
Employed?
Yes. And who
care about their credit.
Who actively take steps to protect their credit because they're the people who could conceivably in the future become homeowners. So
that is part of my tenant criteria. Yes. Works, gets paid, cares about their credit.
Yeah. So what we did in Kirkland Lake was we intentionally bought a mix. So we had some more entry-level, kind of lower-end type buildings, but we also, when we did renovations, we made some really high-end units. And that I found was a much more successful strategy. I did a better job of reading the market and what the needs were in the market, and then finishing units like that. Mm-hmm. So our higher-end units were fantastic. They were much, much better. We got a higher caliber of tenant. They took better care of the property, and they were just more enjoyable to deal with. Right. But that was part of the reason why I loved rent to own so much too, was because, again, you get a higher caliber of tenant. Right. You get people who want to be homeowners, people who, they're willing to cut the lawn, and they're willing to shovel the snow, and they're willing to look after the maintenance needs of a property because they have a vested interest. This is going to be theirs. Mm-hmm. And that was probably one of the major reasons why I loved rents to own so much.
We didn't cover rent to own versus working versus not working.
So rent to owns right now are a better strategy because we're not in the crazy bidding wars. So people who were trying to do rent to owns early in 2022 were just getting priced right out. The numbers weren't working. It wasn't making sense. Yeah. The biggest obstacle right now for people who want to do rent to owns is trying to put a future valuation on the property. Yeah. And the majority of the return in a rent to own comes from the lift in value from purchase price to future purchase price. Right. So that's the biggest challenge right now with rent to owns. But if you're willing to be somewhat flexible, you're willing to give people a 1-year extension, or if let's say you price it at a $40,000 increase and it only goes up 30, if you're willing to come down that 10, you can create scenarios that make sense. Rent to owns is probably one of the best strategies right now for cash flow too.
What else is going to be working in 2023?
I love private lending right now. That's kind of my go-to. I just enjoy, seeing what people are up to, looking at different deals, looking at different markets. I know how to do my due diligence. That's one of the biggest challenges for new investors who go, oh, private lending, this should be easy, I'll do this. And they don't know how to screen and vet, what the deals are, who they're lending to, what the market is, and what the security or the protection is for them. Prom notes are not a way that I would go right now. as values
we're getting
continue to
canceled
drop.
by more listeners as you speak.
I'm sorry.
Poo-poo New Brunswick, poo-poo poo-poo private promissory notes.
And to be fair, this is me, and this is going back to what we talked about.
Everyone's different.
Everyone's different, and people's risk tolerance is different, and people's goals and objectives are different. So I'm speaking now as someone who's been investing for almost 20 years and what works for me. I know that management of apartment buildings is much, much more intensive than it is for managing smaller properties. My smaller properties, I virtually never hear from anybody. My larger buildings, there's always issues. People complaining about temperature, about their tenants next door, about someone leaving stuff in the hallways, like constant issues. And duplexes, I mean, you could go a year without hearing from your tenants in a duplex.
Yeah. Damn it. Oh, private lending.
Yes.
I had to teach my kids. So my kids they each lent a stuffy.
Yes.
To a friend.
Oh.
Right?
Yes.
And they asked me, can you remind them to bring them back? And when the next play date we had together. And they didn't. They forgot. And then this was the learning moment. I said, you don't lend things like that out. If you do, you probably don't expect them to come back. I think you almost have to do the same with some of the private lending in some of the private lending.
Yes.
You have the expectation some of it's not coming back.
Yes.
Right. I don't know if everyone does that.
No, most people don't. And Christian Spilfogel and I talked about this a while ago. And his strategy, I think, he said for every 4 deals that he does or 3 deals that he does, he anticipates one of them isn't coming back. So the returns from the other ones need to be high enough to cover that.
Right. So that'd be smart.
Right. But that's part
so
of
you need to charge a hard enough rate.
Yes.
And the risk has to be low enough
yes.
that they come back.
Exactly. But that's part of your due diligence process. So I don't lend money on properties that I'm not willing to own myself.
Right.
So I look at the property, I look at the loan to value, I make sure there's enough money to cover my money if I have to take the property back over, plus legal fees and all the other things. So I better want to own that property if I'm going to, because again, I don't like prom notes. So.
Will you lend on someone's home?
No.
Why not?
Way too emotional. Way too emotional, and it just, everything gets cloudy with that. You know, an investment property, I quite frankly don't want to own a bunch of single family homes with people living in it that I then have to evict and all the other things. So I would rather own someone's investment property and manage a tenant from the beginning. And I have no issues with property management. I've been doing it since 2005. But it's very different, having done rent-to-owns with homeowners, it's very different to work directly with a homeowner. And there's a lot more concessions expected too. You know, if you're lending someone money for their house, it's usually like personal debts they're paying off, it's credit cards and those kinds of things. And if they're coming to you as a private lender, it means that, you know, they're not able to get a line of credit from a bank. So there's already some credit and some different issues there. And now you're coming in and bailing them out on their home. But I feel that there's sometimes a bit of a feeling of entitlement, like you're going to take my home away from me and you're painted as the bad guy. Whereas if it's an investment property, it's much more likely to be business. I don't want to be the bad guy for anybody. I mean, I will, but I'd prefer not to set myself up in that scenario.
What kind of terms are you looking for if you're going to lend on someone's income property?
It depends. I'm willing to go to 80. Right now, I'm looking less than 80% loan to value because I anticipate the market declining by another 10 to 15%. So I want to make sure that I'm protected, and then there's still money for a realtor if needed. Interest rates I'm looking at right now, probably 12. It's costing 6.5%, 7% to borrow money from HELOCs. So 12 to me is kind of where you're starting. You know, typically I'm looking 6 months to a year. When you're doing private lending, it's usually shorter term stuff.
And then, like, how would you structure the payments? Are you wanting monthly payments, or are you doing balloon?
I don't like balloon payments at the end. We could do a balloon at the beginning, but I really prefer seeing that someone can manage their cash flow, and I would prefer to receive. I obviously take my lender fee up front, so I usually charge a 1 to 2% lender fee, and then I prefer to get monthly payments so that I know that they're managing their financial situation. Typically, for most people, when they're struggling financially, the non-payment is the first sign that they're in trouble. So if they're not having to make monthly payments to you, you don't get that sign that they're in trouble until it's too far gone for you to help.
Do you still have a mortgage license?
No.
Okay.
No, I gave it up.
Anything else that's going to be working in 2023? You mentioned cash investing. If you're investing cash, you have a lot more.
You have a ton more flexibility. In terms of other stuff that's working, I think land development. I think there will be people who were land banking, who might be in financial situations where they would need to dump land. So I think land development might be a great thing. We still, regardless of whatever's going on with the economy, I mean, I saw Andy Tran's email that came out a while ago talking about how 880,000 people came into Canada in 2022.
Yeah.
We didn't have enough housing for the people who are here already.
No.
So anything that involves adding units, I think would be beneficial. Right. Anything that involves converting unused office space to residential, I think is going to be huge.
I would love to be able to rezone my office to be residential.
Yeah. Well, you have such a beautiful office. I mean, this is a great little place. But anything that basically adds units, anything taking existing properties, I think the coach houses, third suites, those kinds of things are going to be hugely successful as well. You may not be able to refi and pull 100% of your money out, but the boost in cash flow is going to make a big difference. And I think there's going to be demand for units like that.
Just to elaborate on the 800,000 number, it's new immigrants, like new Canadians, and then you add a lot of the work visas and student visas.
Student visas, yeah.
But they're all here. They all need a place to live too.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what piece of paper they're here on.
Yeah, they still need a place to live.
Somewhere to live. Exactly.
They're not gonna. They don't want to stay in a hotel.
No, and it's not like rents have gone down.
No, they're insane.
Yeah, and it's super competitive right now.
Yeah.
It's super competitive. So I think that there's always going to be demand, and basically anywhere where you can buy a single family house, add a couple of units. You buy a piece of land and you build something on it. Those strategies I think are going to be promising. The offsetting will be as inflation continues, the cost of materials and labor, right? So you have to make sure you run your numbers and you know what you're doing ahead of time.
And then just to add to that, where these immigrants are going, Rockstar produced a really lovely infographic. This sounds crazy especially when you see it. When you see a picture of the map of Canada, 50% of Canadians live below are below our largest U.S.-Canada border.
Really?
So basically, like, beyond the Golden Horseshoe of Ontario.
Yeah.
But yeah, 50% of Canada lives there.
Wow.
Isn't that insane?
That is insane. I'd love to see that graphic.
I'll show it to you after this.
That sounds good.
Isn't that crazy?
That's wild.
So when all these people are like, oh, go invest here, go invest in New Brunswick, in Alberta, whatever, like 50% are going to end up around the Golden Horseshoe.
Well, that's it. And I think part of the reason for the growth in New Brunswick and some of the maritime provinces is because Alberta was doing terribly. So everybody who was working in the oil fields all went back home to New Brunswick and Newfoundland and all those provinces. And now that Alberta's doing better, everybody's gone back again. So the population has actually dropped. So your tenant pool has actually dropped when you're investing in the Maritimes right now. It's this like internal migration, right?
A lot of course instructors are not going to like you, Elizabeth Kelly.
That's okay. I just do my own thing.
As your own thing, are you taking more coaching clients on?
I do have a couple of openings, yeah.
Just a couple?
Just a couple.
And where can people find out more?
I'm really hard to find. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook. I do have a website, ekconsulting.ca. You can find me lots of places. And I'll obviously always at Wealth Hacker. And I'll be at Multifamily as well.
Oh yeah, I had to buy my ticket still. Sorry, Seth.
and then we are having another summit coming up as well. We have not announced the date yet, but we hosted, my friend Corey Spurley and I hosted a summit, which you were part of. Thank you for that. In October, people can actually still grab recordings. resilientsummit.ca, and it went so well and the feedback was so positive that we're really excited to host another one. So
And you're not announcing timing yet?
not announcing it yet.
And it was a 3-day event the last time?
It was a 3-day. I think people found that a little overwhelming. They didn't sleep. So we're going to look at
They
going
can consume it on their own schedule. They don't have to sit there for 3 days.
And that's one of the best things about the recordings. Like Corey and I were really surprised, but we go in and look, and there's still people here in January watching recordings from presentations that were in
Good.
October. Like the information is so evergreen, and we covered such a range of topics about how to be resilient in tough times that people are still watching and learning. So
Right. That's the way it should be. Like if it's a especially if it's an evergreen topic, for example, like apartment buildings, like you probably need to consume it a couple times for it to stick.
yeah,
And it costs you nothing to do it.
Yeah, and you talk to people like Corey, and he loves apartment buildings, and that's his life, and that's great. It works for him.
But I'm sure he doesn't like all the competition out there.
No, well, there is that. But that's the importance of knowing being the architect of your future and designing the life that you want to live, and knowing what you want.
That's a good place to leave it there. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you for watching. If you want to learn how to invest in real estate from scratch, my team teaches beginners how to use the #1 investment strategy that I personally use in a virtual free training class every month. Go to investortraining.ca/YouTube to register for our next class. The link is also in the description as well. I publish at least 2 to 3 videos a week here, so subscribe if you want to keep learning from seasoned investors like myself and my guests. And if you're just starting out, feel free to ask questions and comment below, and I do the best to answer each of those comments and questions myself. Again, if you're ready to learn the nitty-gritty about real estate investing from a professional investor, register for our next virtual class. That's at investortraining.ca/YouTube. Thanks again for watching. See you in the next video.